Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Praise the Lord. It's good to see each and every one of you today, and I want to thank Pastor Q and Pastor Tim English for always indulging and opening their church to us. Certainly, I'm not a stranger to many of you. I've been to many of the meetings that were held under the Clergy Roundtable, the Criminal Justice Roundtable, and to all of our distinguished members of the clergy. I want to thank all of you and advocates and many of our Bronx residents truly for the work that you do each and every day. So I thank you, Dr. Pryor, for the question. So just a little bit of a quick history. I was recently elected to the New York City Council last year in November to succeed outgoing council member Helen Diane Foster, who served for 12 years and was term limited out of office. Prior to my election in the council, I was an assembly member in Albany in the state legislature. And I served there for 4 years and worked so closely with a lot of state officials, with our governor. And while I know she's not here, I always want to recognize someone who is a mentor to me, the Deputy Borough President, Aurelia Green, who actually gave me my start years ago with an internship when I was in college. And that internship led to a lifetime partnership with her. And I still to this day consider her one of my trusted friends, mentors, and a second mother. And now being in the council, being a part of the new leadership in the city of New York under the leadership of Mayor Bill de Blasio, under our new speaker, Melissa Viverito, I was named the chair of the Committee on Public Safety. And my role as a committee chair is to facilitate hearings each and every month, to be a part of conversations, and to oversee and work with the New York Police Department, with our 5 district attorneys, our special narcotics prosecutor, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and last but not least, the Mayor's Director of Criminal Justice. It's a very important committee. There's been a lot of work that was done in the City Council prior to my election with the Community Safety Act, with the Inspector General Bill. A lot of great work done. A lot of key people like Council Members Jamani Williams and Brad Lander and many others that really led the charge. And now as a new chair, someone that took over after many years of former council member Peter Vallone, I really look at this chairwomanship as a real opportunity to do a lot of good things. There are a lot of priorities that I have been and will be focusing on as it relates to the police department, but I guess my #1 concern and priority will always be to improve the relationships between law enforcement and community residents. As Dr. Pryor has said, we are all in this together. We are all partners in this, and we simply cannot sit back and expect everyone to come into our communities and take care of our children and our families. We have to have a holistic approach to how we address crime, how we address the gang wars, how we address an increase in the proliferation of guns in our community, and how we certainly defy a lot of that with jobs, with sustainable programs like after school and mentoring, taking young people by the hand and helping them, opening doors of opportunity like someone did for me many years ago. So that's my #1, and obviously it's a tall order, it's a big challenge, but challenges can always be met. Other issues within the committee that we have been focusing on is decriminalizing marijuana, which is something that we've talked about in Albany as well as the city. Low-level possessions of marijuana. We're trying to change the dynamics of young people, unfortunately, beginning a life in the criminal justice system with what currently is a misdemeanor, depending on how much marijuana you possess in plain view. We're looking to work with Commissioner Bratton and try to change how we deal with a lot of those situations where young people may have marijuana in possession. Other things that I'm focusing on is equity in the city of New York as it relates to our boroughs outside of the borough of Manhattan. And that's a resource, that's a budget issue, making sure that our local precincts are given sufficient resources for consistent visibility. One of the things that the council has done based on the mayor's preliminary budget in February, we released our response. And as it relates to public safety, we had 3 priorities. #1, we are asking for additional police officers in the police department, and that's 1,000 officers that we're looking to increase the workforce by. #2, we're looking to address a problem or a challenge called civilianization, We're looking to see how many uniformed officers we can have patrolling on our streets. We're also looking at a comprehensive plan to look at the overtime at the police department, as well as addressing a lot of the capital renovations for our local precincts. Many of us go to precincts for council meetings, and we want to uplift a lot of the officers. We want to raise the morale in precincts, so we feel that capital renovations and modernizations that have not always happened, we want that to be addressed as well. So how do we challenge and how do we get a lot of these items done? The budget process will start this week. The mayor releases executive on Thursday, and every committee at the council will hold hearings. I will have hearings as public safety chair. Also, every month we hold hearings down in City Hall. I've held numbers of hearings, but one hearing that really sticks out is a hearing that we did last month in concert with Juvenile Justice and Public Housing. We focused on Operation Crew Cut, which is a program that was started a couple of years ago, and it focuses on reducing gang activity and specifically public housing and the rise in crime in public housing. Also, I've been working with mental health as it relates to how our police department responds to missing children that have autism, and how we can focus and provide better resources like the Silver Alert program, extending that to children with special medical needs. So we've been working on quite a bit. I'm now working with women.
No, Councilwoman, don't even go
okay.
now.
Okay, I apologize. But it's just a lot. So let me just sum it up by saying that obviously when you think about public safety, everything in our everyday life has a public safety component. So as I work with the council members, as we talk about some of these priorities, we will be holding hearings and figuring out how best we can solve a lot of these challenges. So I thank you, Dr. Pryor.
No, that's great. And as long as you can stay, I'm going to have questions. Dr. Pryor has no shortage of questions. I'm going to continue. There were a number of issues that were raised. And you know, it's interesting because I was looking at the title of today's event. I thought it was interesting that this event is entitled Creating Safer Communities in New York Through Innovative Collaboration. The reason why I thought that was interesting was just yesterday I met with Susan Herman, the Deputy Commissioner, and their new division is called Collaborative Policing. And we had a very informative meeting. It was very interesting because when I walked in and said that, I began to explain who I was. She said, no need to explain. And I wanted to tell her about my organization. She said, no, I just want to let you know, for full disclosure, we've already checked you out. Which I would expect them to do, right? They are the NYPD. So I shared with her, yes, with her, and we checked you out too. And we compared notes, and it was good to have that icebreaker because we could get a lot of the stuff out of the way, and we could get right down to business. So we had a talk. And believe it or not, to my surprise, that we had far more in common than I thought we would have. I walked in believing that we were going to butt heads, because we just see things from different angles sometimes. But I think that we walked away understanding that we all want the same thing, but we all have different methods of how we want to get to that. I think today's discussion is going to help us tease that out. We all want public safety, but we all don't see the same method of getting there. And so how can we, with different methods, all get to the same place, right? We all don't get here by bus. Some of us come by train, right? Some of us come by car, some walk. So you can't tell me there's only one way to get to the same place, right? There are a myriad of ways of getting here, and I think that if we, share the responsibility, that we not only ease the burden, but we also can get there quicker, and we can get there more efficient, and we can spend less money. I know the councilwoman talked about additional police officers. We might be at odds at that, but that's okay. I don't have a problem with police. I just don't know if adding more police is going to solve the problem. I mean, I'm going to make a statement that we all know. What we've done for the last 40 years in criminal justice simply has not worked.
Exactly.
We realize now that you can't arrest your way out of the problem. You can't incarcerate yourself out of the problem. You can't lock kids up in doorways. It's become too expensive and it's destroyed communities and families. So we already know we're not going to do more of the same. We're not going to do more of the same. We're going to have to do some things differently.
Yes.
And in fact, the federal government and the state has already stated that they're not going to continue, pouring more and more money into failed policies. It's just not, it's not happening. And so, y'all can clap on that. So on that note, then, I'm going to go back to the commander and ask, in all your years of work, I know you've done some things, what works and what doesn't work? What works and what doesn't work?
What I find, one of the most important things, and I will agree, the idea of just loading the cells up isn't what's going to work. That's not the answer. The answer is identifying the guys who are causing the problem. Okay. In the crews, we talk about your crews. But this far I can name 72 different crews of kids, gangs that associate. Not each and every one of them are bad, but there are certain crews that are bad. But within that crew, you have to identify who's the guy. Because this is what we see. What I say is, you have a crew, there may be 30, 40 guys in this gang. And by a crew, this could be your block, where you hang out, and you call yourself a certain name. 30, 40 guys on that block that associate or call themselves part of it. But out of that 30 or 40, there may be 2 or 3. And they're what your hardcore guys. That if something happens, they're the one that always comes out with the gun. They're the one that always does the shooting. They're the one. You remove him. You don't need to remove the 30 or 40. You need to remove the 1 or 2. And it's got to be pinpoint focus on who the bad guys are. When we do remove the bad guy, all of a sudden, you take out of that 30, you take those 2, the other 28 aren't going to be a problem anymore. They're going to see this guy, he's got to be removed. So the other 28 aren't influenced by him. I mean, just the other day in the 4-4 precinct, and this is a tragedy that it's going on out here. 16-year-old kid has a dispute with another kid. They have a street fight. 16-year-old goes, gets a gun, comes back with his 13-year-old friend. Gives the 13-year-old the gun, tells him shoot him. The 13-year-old shoots him. That 16-year-old is the influence. That's the kid that we have to remove because he's taking the 13, 12-year-olds and turning them down the wrong path. So again, it's really a focus, and that's what Crew Cut's about. We work closely with all different prosecutors. We work very closely with the feds right now when we get the really bad guy. And I'm talking about the guy that's maybe been arrested and done time for a couple of shootings, comes back out and does another one. Those are the guys that we have to kind of remove from this community so everyone else can survive.
Thank you for that response, and I think that was a good response. I want to ask the audience, I want you to also take your questions down. At some point, we're going to get your questions. But I want to pose this question to the community, and I want you to hold the answer until we go back to the councilwoman. This is the question. So the commander pointed out that in certain communities you have these crews, and within even the crews you have certain individuals that are responsible for actually committing the violent crimes and so forth and so on. That being the case, if that was the case, and in your community you knew who the person was, or the persons who were actually engaging in violent crimes and so forth and so on, how would the community handle that situation? Don't give me the answer, just hold on to that. Let's get to the councilwoman. So councilwoman, you're on public safety, and I know that's a powerful committee. I would like you to tell me in very specific terms what's going to be your strategy for getting our communities back to the way they used to be. I grew up in the 60s. And in the 60s, when it got hot, we didn't have air conditioning. We used to go up on the roof and sleep. Right?
Fire escape.
We didn't lock our doors. When my mother wanted to borrow sugar from Miss Jones upstairs, I ran upstairs, I kicked in the door, Miss Jones, Mommy wanted to borrow a cup of sugar. She gave me the cup, I left. But we didn't lock doors. So I do know that this is something that did exist at one time. Councilwoman, if you were moving towards that particular goal, what would be some of the steps you would take to get us back to that place?